if you've ever had those moments or those times where as you're chatting and you get that little aha, that little realization, or I call them even sometimes like those "that's so Raven" moments where you hatch a piece of life or a piece of truth, you'll know what I mean here. And this, I hope, is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Lauren Jean, and this is the Thinking of Me podcast. This is something which has been in the pipeline for quite a while, and it's really exciting to get to record today's trailer and intro to let you know all things Thinking of Me, our origin story, why we're here, what we're hoping to achieve in bringing this to you. Basically, the name Thinking of Me came about in 2018. This is 2024, and I'm now a 29-year-old woman, and our story began really as a 22-year-old girl who couldn't get her thoughts in order about herself, about life in general, and very much so relationships. I hope through our podcast, through the stories and the messages and the journeys that I'll discuss and I'll get to discuss alongside some of our friends, might bring a bit of an insight as to how those thoughts can get clouded and where talking it out loud as well as someone else's story can make the big difference. Our logo, even with the podcast sound symbol, even that within the cloud, I got really excited about when I saw that, because it is in the out loud, as I say. And when those two things get blurry, everything else gets a little bit blurry. So I won't babble too much. I'll get straight to some of the points of today. And the first and foremost is where stories began. And stories began for me with my granny. Gan, I call her. I'm from a house in the countryside where stories were always important growing up, but also important for my whole family, and hearing of ancestors and that before us, but also just silly day-to-day things or something that would have happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and is said on repeat. Right now, as I say, I'm 29, and there's some stories that are told at home as if they happened yesterday and they were maybe 30, 50 years ago. And the laugh is had in the same way as if you never heard the story told before. And my Gan, as I say, is the best storyteller. I can't do any justice to her in how she can tell them and the way she can bring them back to life. And I hope maybe across our time here we'll get to share some of them as well. When I was little, we'd go for walks, and it's in walks and listening to podcasts that began to change some of my mindset, and that brought some of those thoughts and those clouds together for me in my understanding of things, in my journey. And really that was in and around 2020, 2021. So bringing this podcast and these stories to life of my journey, and as I say, journeys of other people, is where the excitement is. The walks in the country at home with my Gan and with my mum, when we go on jungle adventures, it was like a whole new world. And I invite you, as you listen, to open up into the idea of a whole new world. The imagination is something powerful. And I'm blessed in having a figment of that, a fraction of that, a section of that, a tiny piece of cloud of that, like the way my granny has, and other great storytellers that there are. Because if we can lose ourselves into another story and into a new world, there's an ability there to think differently. And if we can catch those clouds, catch those thoughts of another story and bring them into our own and write them in what we want for ourselves, that's where success can happen or achievement can happen. At Thinking of Me, our aim is always fulfillment, because success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. It's Tony Robbins who says that, and who I would be a big student of and grateful to learn from his work. But also, it's the truth. I woke up age 22 and I wasn't happy, and I had done all the things that was asked of me. I thought I was on track with the life and the plan that I wanted. And as I say, in 2018, I took the sledgehammer and I shattered everything around me because I didn't know what I wanted. And I very consciously knew and can reflect that. I knew at the time and can reflect that that is what happened. I just said, no, I don't want this. And piece by piece, started to change the world as I knew it. And I clung to stories of other people in that time. I clung to particularly my childhood story that was always important, and that's Harry Potter for me. I'd be a big Harry Potter fan. And in Lauren's world, if it didn't happen in Harry Potter, it doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is, if I can't contextualize it from a story with it, or a message that's within the books particularly, then it's a little bit outside my grasp. I got my first tattoo in 2018, and it was something of a new part of myself I found, or kind of took back out of hiding, of hibernation. That tattoo is actually on kind of the side of my rib as such. And it's Dentadoiakinus. It's in Greek. It's "you wouldn't do it," because that summer that was the motto. If you wouldn't do it, it meant you had to do it. It was law, it was canon. But I always thought my first tattoo would have something to do with Potter, because it had always held such meaning, and it always held such grounding for me. My third tattoo was in coining our big mission, our big creative vision that we have. And I'll come to that again throughout the podcast, where I speak a bit more about the overarching story that I've been creating to share. But as I say, if at a time when I couldn't understand my own story, I clung to the story of other people to make sense of what did I really want, and not even what did I really want, but who was I really? And I'm excited to be able to bring some of that message and understandings and learnings to someone else, because it was only as I started to listen to not just podcasts, but read different books. And when I'd read something that someone else had coined, another philosopher or psychologist, or just even another person's story that's out there, I go, oh, hey, I thought like that too. And it all started to make sense then. I held on to the blog, which I began in 2018. I've held on to the blog because that's where I logged the new thoughts. If it wasn't written down on pen and paper, I'd lose it. So the podcast is really important for us now to begin to speak into existence, to say out loud the new thoughts, but also the story, the whole story of it. If you've ever had those moments or those times where, as you're chatting and you get that little aha, that little realization, or I call them even sometimes like those "that's so Raven" moments, where you hatch a piece of life or a piece of truth, you'll know what I mean here. And this, I hope, is the podcast for you, because it's in wanting to learn and wanting to hear and wanting to listen and wanting to have something different and lose yourself in the imagination and the creativity and just the fun that is life, just the excitement. Nothing better than a belly laugh and genuinely getting caught up in the moment. If you're in any way resonating with any of that, then that's what we're hoping to do here. I'm here speaking on my own today as someone who not just self-isolated for a time, because that's a whole other thing, but as someone who purposely takes time on my own to reflect to get work done, to just enjoy the moment sometimes, whether that's in nature or something else in the creative sphere. There's a power of just being you. And thinking of me is not that self-centered or selfish approach that's, oh, it's all about me and nothing else. It's actually just tuning into, as I say, what do I want? Who am I? How am I feeling? I am important, and I am someone that's also in the room, and my thoughts are here, and I need to know what they mean. Because if I don't know what they mean and I don't know what I like, then how can someone else? And as I say, this all began really at the breakdown of a relationship. I woke up at 22 not knowing what I wanted anymore and being terrified at the reality of what was happening, what had just happened for someone else in ending a life. And I was always someone, and always have been someone, who'd be full of life. And I think it was when my internal wasn't matching my external, I wasn't bringing the two of them together, that I lost who I was. And that had really began to happen slowly but surely at 17, heading off to college, but really had been something that was like that from childhood, and I hadn't really ever acknowledged it or brought it out. So without getting too deep into some of that, I have my notebook with me today because I caught something. I caught something in thinking about what I wanted to share in our intro and in our trailer. And that was that, and what I wrote was, it was in seeing the written of what was happening on the inside, that the thoughts were not heard on the outside. If you don't feel heard, when I didn't feel heard, I got loud. And as I say, that's where some of my outside even started to change. The loudness, I've been loud since a child. I didn't always understand why I get in trouble for being loud. I'm still loud, I get excitable, and that's great. And I love that side of me. But my weight, when it went out of control, when things like acne and that all started to happen in a way that had never happened even in teenage years. 22, I became this whole other person. And here at the age of 29, I am excited to be able to show all the fun that's happened in my life and happens in other people's lives when you drive yourself in a new way and you catch on to a new story. We began in 2018 with the mission of saying the things out for someone else who hadn't heard it, can't hear it. And that's what I want to do with us here in the podcast too. So to share just a small, silly story of what's happening in my life at the minute, there's been a lot of change. I've launched business this year. We're here doing the podcast. There's been some relationship changes and things like that that are exciting and in a new way. But more than anything else, I think the most fun thing that I want to bring to this is the idea that, not even the idea, the reality that as you are yourself, you really stop caring what other people think. You just say no. You just say, I'm actually going to do it anyway. And in the best possible way, in the most exciting possible way, and in the heartfelt way that's not just, this is something I'm going to do and I want to do it because I'm stubborn about it. They're two different messages. Today's trailer, today's intro is to say that we're here for you to listen, we're here for you to share, and we're here to bring about some successful friends and successful people that are lined up to come and speak with you. Life will keep moving forward, whether or not you do or don't, with or without you. Life will keep moving forward. So if you don't catch up and move on and move with, you get stuck somewhere behind. And we believe in holding space for growth. This podcast will grow as we grow. I'm very hopeful. I'm very excited about all the direction that Thinking of Me is going, that I, Lauren Jean, am going. And none of this would have happened if it wasn't for paper and pen. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for tuning out of what was happening around me a small bit to start to tune in to what was happening in me. Thinking of me is here so that you can think of you, so that collectively we can make change and we can make growth. Looking forward to bringing you our first season, which is woman-centered. All our speakers this season are women, are females who have a story, a journey to share. And with that, we'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.